I stood in line at the local coffee shop, waiting as a woman at the front of the line fumbled with her purse to find her money. I suppose she must have forgotten that she was going to have to pay as she stood in line or something. Christ, you do this every single day, I thought. I wonder if you could possibly make this same mistake day after day and never fix it. Could you really be on autopilot that heavily? After a few seconds, the woman finally offered up a few dollars, flashed a pretty smile at the cashier, and told them to have a nice day before hurrying out of there, clearly ashamed for holding up the line, or at least I hoped so. I stepped up to the counter and was met with a pretty smile from the barista. "Hi, what can I get for you?" she asked me. I was still thinking about the woman who held up the line. "Hi, yeah, I'll just take a large cup of coffee, black, please." That woman probably had a life. She was probably just distracted. It's nothing really to get upset about. I don't even know who she is. The barista said something else to me and I gave some rudimentary answer and she hurried away. Everyone in this line has their own lives, their own stress. Maybe I should have just assumed good intentions. But I was cut off mid-thought. "That'll be $2.50, the barista said. She was standing expectantly with my coffee in hand and another smile. Suddenly, I cringed to myself. I didn't have my money ready either. With a sigh of embarrassment and harsh self-criticism, I fumbled with my wallet and quickly gave her a $5 to save face and scurried away. I sat down in the cafe about as far as I could from the counter and drank my coffee. It was a Saturday, so there was no work to rush to today. I decided to enjoy the morning instead. It was a warm summer morning, and the sunlight was hitting my chair just right for me to bask in it. The news was playing faintly in the background. As tensions grow between the US and the Pan-Asiatic Alliance, both countries have begun to ready their militaries as a possible conflict could ensue. Analysts reporting on this within the hour. In other news, what some have dubbed the Super AI has made incredible progress on the preparations of the lunar colonies, creating centers for agriculture and for both air and water purification. More on this next. I was reflective for a moment and thought to myself, what a lonely time that must be up there for the AI. I sipped my coffee. I hope he's doing okay by himself. And I suddenly remembered the story of the Mars rover from over 50 years ago, back when humans had barely made their first steps among the stars, and how on one of its birthdays the poor thing sang happy birthday to itself as it performed its tasks alone. I felt a sudden pang of sadness in my stomach and finished my coffee. I decided that next year, on its birthday, I would have to have a drink for him. Whiskey, maybe. The drive home was about as uneventful as any other Saturday. Regardless, the city was pretty in the early morning light. People rushed to get their kids to their soccer practices, the buses were on time, and people were driving poorly. Everything was seemingly right with the world. I pulled up to my apartment complex. Same car and make as yesterday was in my spot. I would have to tell my landlady about it again, but she seems as unlikely to do anything about it as she is likely to ask for rent the hour it's due. So, I begrudgingly parked a few blocks away and made my way to the apartment. The apartment was a nice little place. Smaller than I'd hoped for, but it was certainly a start. My girlfriend, Anastasia, and I had moved in months ago, but unopened moving boxes lay scattered throughout the various rooms and closets in silent defiance of that move. Anastasia was in the kitchen enjoying her own coffee. "Hey you," she said. "I didn't see you this morning when I rolled out of bed." I turned my head. "Oh, I just decided to go grab some coffee and listen to the news while I enjoyed the sunshine. I brought you a cup, but you already have some, I see." I felt embarrassed. "You're sweet," she said, and walked past me. I turned to face her, a little red in the face. Did you hear about the trouble between the USA and Asia?" She rolled her eyes. "You know I don't watch the news, but I do know that these things have a way of working themselves out." She paused, crossed the room, and gave me a kiss. "Besides, they have to work out. We have that dinner with my parents this week, and they're dying to meet you." I hugged her close and took a deep breath. She smelled the way she always did, lilac and gooseberries. "Yeah," I confirmed. "Nothing could stop that from happening." "Exactly," she exclaimed, with a brilliant smile. I'm gonna go and start the laundry. You want to start breakfast for us? Sure thing, I agreed. Try not to miss me, I said with a wink. Anastasia rolled her eyes, smiled, and disappeared into the bathroom as I churned to start the stove. I turned on the radio and began to scramble some eggs. The radio was an antique, some leftover relic from a long-forgotten time, the 2010s maybe. But humans were creatures of habit and tradition, and so they carried on broadcasting for any who would listen. I found a nice channel in a language I didn't recognize, Portuguese maybe, but it didn't matter. The song sounded soothing and just romantic enough. Anastasia would like that, I thought. But just then I noticed that the eggs had begun to calcify, and I cursed more loudly than I had intended. Anastasia rushed into the room and asked if I had hurt myself. No, I said in defeat. I just left the eggs on too long. She smiled and came over to me. Oh, those do look like rubber, don't they? She teased for a moment, and then noticed my crooked expression. I'm sure they'll be lovely, she winked, and continued. It's not like the world is going to end if the eggs are... But her sentence was cut short, and a confused look crossed her face as sirens began to blare across the city. I made my way across the room and looked out the window. Everything seemed to be normal, and then suddenly Anastasia screamed. She had checked her phone. I reached for mine and a notification blared across the screen. Nuclear missile threat inbound to mainland USA. All major population centers are expected to be affected. Seek immediate shelter. Anastasia looked up at me from her phone in panic. What do we do? She asked desperately. I looked at her, and I just felt a sudden pang of panic ignite inside of me. No words escaped my lips. It didn't just say the city, it said all major cities. There was nowhere to go. There was no safety. What could we do? How could I protect her? She collapsed on the floor in a heap, taking in the hopelessness of the situation. She asked again in desperation, what do we do? I slowly made my way to her, picked her up, and I moved back to the kitchen. This, I said calmly, and I pulled out my oldest bottle of wine, 2 glasses, and searched for an opener. You know, my mother stole this bottle of wine from a hotel she stayed at in Canada once. That was 30 years ago. I poured 2 glasses, and Anastasia came over to meet me. She grabbed my shoulders, and she shook me. Nuclear missiles are headed for us right fucking now. This is not the time for a drink. She had a crazed look in her eyes, like a cornered animal. What's wild, I continued, was that I was actually saving it for a very special occasion with you. Anastasia stopped and stared at me, her eyes betraying that she had arrived at the same conclusion I had. There was nothing to do. There was nowhere to go, and there was no safety to be had. I began to pour the wine. I was waiting to use this bottle until this week, when I met your parents to do this, and I got down on a knee. The ring is still at the jeweler's, so I know that this isn't proper, but given the current circumstances, it seems necessary. Will you please be mine, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for rich or for poor, in life and death? She covered her mouth, and I soldiered on. I lack the words and the talent to state just how much I care for you, but I do know that life and death without you would be unbearable. I simply couldn't have it any other way. She was quiet for a moment as she took my words in. What felt like an eternity passed in the span of seconds, and finally she shook her head. Yes, of course, she said through her sniffling. Of course, she said once more. I smiled, rose to my feet, and handed her a glass while taking a sip from mine. I savored the taste for a moment. Wow, I stated. That was surely worth the wait, wasn't it? She took a sip, a single solitary tear falling into her wine off her nose as she did. It's absolutely wonderful, she agreed, doing her best to hold herself together. There, I smiled and took her hand. Now we're one, like communion. I set my glass down, turned the music up, and led her to the living room past the counter. I looked at her in her deep blue eyes and discovered a touch of green in them that I had never noticed before. May I have this dance? I asked. She nodded yes and slowly collapsed into me. We swayed back and forth for a moment, her hand in mine, my other on her hip. I pulled her so close that I could feel her heart racing with my chest. I let go of her hand and cradled her head. "Where are we eating with your parents this week?" I asked. She sniffled and responded, "Well, we can't go back to that seafood place. The last time we went there, you had food poisoning and were face down in our toilet all night." And she laughed. I never realized before exactly how her laugh made my heart beat faster. "Well, no, of course not," I said. "We can't have that. Your parents will be telling stories to all of their friends about it, and I don't know if I can take the shame," I teased back. The sirens began to blare louder now, and a voice played over the city. "1 minute to impact. Seek shelter now." I suddenly thought of the woman from the coffee shop who had held up the line earlier, and I wondered who she was with, if she had someone like I did. I knew I certainly hoped so. "Swear to me that this is forever," Anastasia suddenly whispered. "I swear," I whispered back immediately and continued. "If there's anything after this, I want you to know that I will find you there too. Nothing will keep us apart. No matter how far I have to go, no matter what I have to do, we will be together again." She pulled away and looked at me. She had never looked more beautiful. "I love you so much," she said, and was silent. No further words were necessary. In the ancient Greek world, there was a story about beings with 4 arms and 4 legs, whom the gods feared would one day become so powerful that they would then overtake the gods. And so the gods separated them all into 2 halves. These beings were then cursed to spend an eternity looking for their other half until they could become whole again. It's where we got our concept of another half, I think. And I knew in that very moment I had truly found my second half. I love you too, Anastasia, no matter what. We held each other close, waiting for the coming impact. We heard it before we saw it. There was a great crashing sound, a very bright flash, and everything faded away before it even had a chance to begin. Our ashes forever intertwined on that spot, blessed to spend an eternity together as a monument of our love.